Hey everybody, welcome to the Hello Road podcast. I'm Ethan.
I'm Paul.
And today is episode number 20. We've made it to 20. Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. It seems like just yesterday we were on episode 19.
It was a couple weeks ago. You got sick. You got sick again. Your kids keep getting you sick. So
damn kids.
I know. But yeah, here we are, episode 20. I think we got some fun stuff to talk about today. We want to talk about dead car brands.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe resurrecting one. What dead car brand might we resurrect if we had the chance and the resources to do so? So
exactly.
Yeah, I think that would be a fun thing to talk about. But first, you don't have any project car updates? Anything you're doing to the Daihatsu other than just letting it sit there, collect dust?
Yeah, it's collecting a lot of dust right now. I've been doing a lot of house projects, so it's really been kind of keeping me from getting to working on it or washing it or thinking about what to do with it so it doesn't look exactly the same as it did at the last Radwood.
Okay. Yeah.
But I've got some ideas in my head to spruce it up a little bit before the next event. Yeah, other than that, same thing with the Fit. It's dirty, needs a bath. Yeah.
All right. But you did buy a bass guitar, right? Or did you look for? You did. What'd you get?
Yeah. I bought a Fender American Professional. I'm not a professional. Jazz.
So what are you doing with that bass? Okay. And you don't play jazz either, so this is kind of an odd choice.
It is kind of an odd choice. But no, it was actually a really, really good deal for it. It was on clearance for a really kind of sad reason. It was a special order that somebody didn't pick up.
Uh-oh.
And because it has a maple fingerboard, the desire for those is low. I don't know why. It looks awesome and sounds awesome to me. So, but it's very, very nice. It's replacing my bass that I've owned for about 20 years that has had an unfortunate case of neck bow that really can't be fixed. So
without just repling
the neck. And I didn't want to do that. And it was just time. So, but yeah, I'm really enjoying it. When I do get an opportunity to play it. So yeah, it's very, very nice.
Very cool.
Only truth about it is that it is an American bass. The professional and jazz part, they're not true because that's not me. So
Yep. Oh wow. Well, so you don't have any car updates, but you do have a bass update. So that's nice.
Bass update. There it is.
So I guess a couple of things have been going on with me with car related stuff. So the Kia Telluride review is now finally up on YouTube.
Yes.
YouTube.com/HelloRoad. That was a ton of fun to get going, and it was super in-depth, and I was pretty happy with how that came out. So if anybody wants to check out the new 2020 Kia Telluride, that review is up on my YouTube channel. That was a ton of fun. We took it on a little road trip and loaded it up with a bunch of camping gear, and it was a blast. So I really dig that car. The only other thing I've really been working on is Liam Neeson's getting a little bit of love. Because we're actually going to be doing a race soon, the Lemons race. We're going to be racing Button Willow at the end of September. So if anybody wants to come out to the lovely city, it's not a city. There's one
horse town, I think is.
Well, there's one horse and maybe like 2,000 cows.
Yeah.
And the smell of whatever the gas industry is around there just stinks. If anybody wants to come out to Button Willow at the end of September, Liam Neeson will be there, most likely, if we don't screw it up before the race. But yeah, there's this year for Lemons, they have a new rule. You have to have a fire suppression system. Back last year, before they changed the rule, you just had to have a fire bottle in the car. But now they want an actual fire suppression system where you've got nozzles pointed at the driver and nozzles pointed in the engine bay. So we're just now installing a system that I bought a couple weeks ago. So we're running, bending some aluminum tubes and figuring out some brackets and that kind of thing to install. The system was not cheap. It was a 10-pound system. I think it was almost $700 for this system. But when you think about it, like I'm asking my friends and my brother to race with me, and I want to just make sure that we've got the safest car possible. So
yeah, totally.
So it's a good thing to have that installed.
Yeah, that's definitely something. It's a lot more advanced than just a fire extinguisher bottle in there. And
sure.
So how does it kind of work? Is there you just pull a trigger basically, or pull a pin or something, and the system just lets go? Or
pretty much. I mean, it's you basically have this bottle that's mounted. We have it mounted on the floor on the passenger side, and then we run literally just run aluminum tube out to where you want to spray. There's some T-junctions and there's some couplers, and then you can have nozzles come out. So we put 2 nozzles that are, one's kind of pointed right by the shifter, and one's kind of a little bit further up towards the firewall, pointed a little bit more towards like feet area. So it just kind of sprays everywhere, and it gives you a little bit more time to get out of the car if you're on fire. So
right.
And then there's 2 that are pointed in the engine bay, but I could care less about those. I mainly just care about the ones in the driver compartment. It's not like our car is worth anything. Like if it's actually on fire, I'd rather just, have all of the fire extinguisher go to the driver.
Yeah.
And who cares about the engine? But it could help if you have something that's not very catastrophic to help put it out before it becomes catastrophic. So
right.
So yeah, basically you've got that system, and then there's this pull, this cable you set up, and then we just have to fab a little bracket that's within reach of the driver. So that way there's just a lever you just pull up, and that sends I forget exactly what it is, but it's a type of it's not halon or anything like that, and it's not like the standard stuff, the wet stuff you'd have in a fire bottle. Like, apparently this is kind of dry and it doesn't ruin electronics or whatever. So
okay, that was my next question. Is what was in the bottle? Was it just like a regular? Because you said it's a 10-pound system, so that's a pretty big ass fire extinguisher. But
yes, it is. I don't remember what it is. It's but you could use it as one. Yeah,
you could.
Yep. Yeah. So that's kind of cool. Nice. Yeah.
And it's just all custom because the kits, like, I guess I'd assume they just come with the bottle and then a bunch of aluminum tubes and nozzles and kind of do as you want. So if you're like racing like a minivan or something like that, and you've got to like take it all the way to the back, because you don't want your minivan to burn up, you probably need to buy 2 systems. But
they make systems that have more than 4 nozzles.
Okay.
But we just got the one with 4, because after that it starts to get really expensive. But there are cars, I've seen race cars with more than 1 fire bottle. Sometimes they'll point one back towards the fuel pump. Chances are, I think with our vehicle, if anything was going to catch on fire, it would be in the engine bay, probably because of oil. And then obviously you got to worry about the fuel lines and all that. So we have one kind of pointed right at fuel and one not just on the other side of the motor. Yeah. And I think it would start to get really expensive if we wanted to have more nozzles. So we're kind of going with the bare minimum essentially. But I think actually it isn't the bare minimum, because I think a 5-pound system is what their bare minimum, but we upped it a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's like so many different, you look at like the installation instructions, like ours came with like nothing. So we're like, okay, well, I don't really know. So we had to look at for other manufacturers and like YouTube videos and all that to kind of get some best practices for it, because we weren't exactly sure where to put the nozzles. We weren't exactly sure where to put the bottle, but we found that, having the bottle kind of tilted up a little bit facing the front of the car was the way to go. So
kind of like Dominic Toretto's NOS bottles in Fast and the Furious.
Oh, yes. Yes, nice. Exactly. Yeah, maybe we should install those next.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. So that was cool. That was a little project that we're not quite done with. I would say we're about halfway done with that.
Okay.
And then they kind of got a little bit more serious about making sure the batteries are really tied down well. We kind of had a really janky battery tie down that it involved like PVC. Like, it was just awful. It was just like it shouldn't have been. I mean, it was one of those. It was one of those things where we had a standard like battery clip, but part of the battery box was missing because it either rusted or like it was plastic or something. We took it out, and at the track they said, "Hey, you got to improve this." So we just kind of took whatever we had, like metal strapping and like anything to kind of like rig this thing together. So they're getting more strict. So we're going to weld up like an actual box for it and make sure that it's really stuck in there good. Because I think what happened is maybe recently a battery came loose during a crash. So that's no good at all.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're heavy.
Yep. And they're heavy.
They can cause lots of damage if they dislodge. If it's like on a one of those GMs that have them in the conveniently located in the front of the fender well on the left hand side, then that the best place for a battery, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, totally.
And it comes loose that way. Then that's a projectile.
Yeah.
You don't want,
and that's why we didn't relocate it to inside the driver compartment or anything like that. We're like, let's just keep it in the front. Keep it in the front, the stock location. So, yeah, we're just going to try to fabricate something that makes that a little bit more sturdy. But,
cool.
And then the other thing that was crazy, because our car has kind of really terrible suspension. It's just stock springs with kind of cheap shocks.
Mm-hmm.
So it bounces around a lot over the turns and the curbs and stuff at the racetrack. So over time, what we just discovered when we started to look at the brake system, we discovered that the hole that holds in one section of the control arm had kind of rounded out a little bit. Ooh. So it kind of, from just, a couple of years of racing, bouncing up and down, and the control arms, just getting bashed all over the place, because we're not easy on this car. We're very hard on the car. And we just realized that little hole, that little on the frame of the vehicle had just rounded out. So there was a lot of play in the control arm, which is not good. No, it's not good. And we just kind of discovered that accidentally. I mean, I knew there was something up, but I thought it was just the sway bar mounts, because those are kind of loose. But it turned out that it was the control arm mount is just bad. So we just figured out what we had lying around. We had a couple washers, nice washers that we had lying around, and we welded those on there and to kind of make it a little bit more round. But it was very difficult to tell where the center should have been, because it was rounded out so much. So we just kind of guessed. So that might affect our alignment a little bit, perhaps, if we didn't quite get it right. But it's a Lemons car, so
yeah. So man, I wonder what the true fix to that would be. You'd probably have to get another subframe or something for it, or however those. I'm not sure how the suspension's set up on that SER, but yeah, that's okay. So washers.
That's all we had. We just kind of, we tacked them in, and then we welded it, and then we, I didn't do any of the welding. My welding's terrible. But it actually looks pretty good.
I'm sure it's good as new.
It actually looks really good, considering we just took some washers and welded them in there. It looks really nice. And I think the washers were thicker than the metal that was, holding the control arm in, which is pretty surprising,
It is kind of scary when you see like what metal the control or the a subframe can be made out of on certain cars. It's just like, it's super thin, it's strong, but it's super thin.
Yeah.
So
I guess the thing is, the next step is we're probably going to have to just pop open the other side. I'm sure it's the same on the other side too.
Yeah.
So that'll be another little project. We don't have a whole lot of time. Plus the car is down on power. We're going to try to figure out if maybe the cam timing is off, maybe it's off a tooth or something. Because it does this weird thing where the previous motor that we had in the car, the red line was about 7,000, maybe a little bit over. So you could bring the motor all the way up to 7,000 every single time, if you wanted to. But this new motor with the same ECU, everything else is kind of the same. It kind of just loses power at like 6,400 RPM. It just kind of just loses it doesn't ever hit a rev limit or anything. It just kind of like bogs down. So, and we did a compression test. Everything looks good. And we're just trying to sort out why is it just bogging down at?
Yeah.
And we don't have, we can check the codes, but a lot of that stuff, you have to drive it for like 100 miles or whatever for a lot of those systems to reset. And we turn off the kill switch every single time. So it's resetting the codes every single time we turn the car off. So
right.
I need to take it on a long drive to really figure out what other codes it's throwing. So who knows? It's just a big mystery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's all part of the fun with it. But yeah, I think you guys are probably on the right track right there with it. Could just be some sort of a timing issue. And, hopefully that's all it is, and that fixes it. And then, we'll get those other washers welded in and be ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
So it's a lot of little things. I guess we put new control arms. The funny thing about this car is that some of the parts are so cheap. So I bought 2 spare control arms. They were $16 each. So that's including all of the, bushings and everything. It's just a complete
$16.
$16. So $32 for both sides.
Wow.
If I wanted to get new, because a lot of times because the front of the car was bouncing up and down so much, we would rip the CV joint boot, and it would just spray grease everywhere. But that hasn't happened since we got our new struts in there. But it used to do that, and we would just replace the whole axle because it was cheaper than like redoing the boot. And the axles were, oh man, they were so cheap. What were they? They might have been $30 a side or something. It was crazy. I mean, and actually, before we upgraded our brakes, I could get brake rotors for $11, $12 a side. It just, I don't know why. I'm not sure why parts for this car were so cheap, considering I guess, I don't know. It's just very odd that they're still cheap. And this car is, how many years old now? 23 years old.
23, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway,
that's very interesting though, that they're so cheap. You would think kind of like, not comparing it to the Charade, but like, those things, the parts are very expensive because they're rare and it's old and whatnot. And this is, not necessarily rare, but it's old. So you think, here's a chance to, make the people that still drive these things really reconsider. But no, wow, $30 for a axle. That's,
I guess there just must be enough other cars that use the same exact part.
It could very well be.
And I know that's the case for the brake rotors, at least their old brake rotors we had. It must be, because they were always, half the time, like you go on Rock Auto and then there'd be like a closeout and I get them for like $5. It was pretty nuts.
Yeah, Rock Auto is good when they send the emails for those things, because I'm like, oh, sweet. I'm going to spend $50 and get a whole bunch of spare parts for the Charade, because they'll always, they always put stuff on there. It's like, $3 for a radiator cap or whatever the case is.
Sure.
And it's great when they do those things. So
yeah. Well, the thing it kind of made me wonder too is for some of those parts, like, granted, I'm not getting the best brake rotors. I'm getting like crappy brake rotors, but it's Lemon. So we figure we'll just, we'll go through them and then just get a new set. But I'm curious, is like, who resurfaces brake rotors anymore when you can get them this cheap? It seems very wasteful. I'm sure it's just going to get melted down again, but when you can get a brake rotor for $11, why would you ever get anything resurfaced? There been a couple of races back when we had our old brake system in the car where we would heat up the brake rotor so much that we would just, after each day, we'd just throw new rotors on it because they would get ruined. $11 rotors, they're not the best. So
yeah, but they serve their purpose and get tossed at the end of the day. So it works. Yeah, no, I don't know anybody who still resurfaces brake rotors. It's usually just cheaper and easier to buy the new ones. And plus, you got to find a place that does it. I remember back when I had my Mini Cooper, I tried to get a set of rotors resurfaced, and I took it to the AutoZone or Kragen or whatever, and they screwed them up.
Oh, yeah.
Because nobody knew how to work the machine there. It's like, yeah, we have it, but we don't know how to use it. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I'm buying new brake rotors now.
Yeah.
Well, kids.
I know. Kids nowadays, they don't know how to resurface. I don't know how to resurface brake.
I don't know how to do it either.
Yeah.
Put it on the machine, put the little blade on it, and it's supposed to cut.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple other little things that my 7 Series is gone that got picked up by Chris from East Coast Classics and the YouTube channel. He's already back home.
It made it.
Yeah. Well, here's what happened. So this is the vehicle that I gave away. I gave away my 1997 BMW 740 IL on my YouTube channel. And it was a vote thing where everybody submitted a video and he had the best video. So everybody voted for him and he won. So he finally picked up the car a few months after he won it, a couple months after he won it. And he came out here. Apparently he had this nightmare flight. His flight was delayed and then canceled. So he ended up getting out here 2 days later than he wanted to. And he had 2 of his kids with him. So their whole trip was delayed by a couple of days, and they really had to try to compress their trip into a shorter period of time. And they were going back to school, so they weren't able to do the whole trip. So basically, they stopped at a few places like the Wigwam Hotel in San Bernardino. They went to where else did they go? Just a lot of Route 66, a lot of the places that you would hit on your way out of California. All the way down to Texas. So they ended up making it all the way to Waco, Texas. And I think they dropped the car off with his brother or something like that. So
okay.
And then they flew back. So I'm pretty sure what's going to happen is he's either going to come out and grab the car from Texas and drive it back, or just have it shipped back. So I think he fulfilled the purpose of what he wanted to do with the car and really do that kind of fun family road trip, which is pretty neat. So I watched all of his videos. He posted them the same night. So he did this vlog style. He would shoot a little bit with the car and a little travel and all the places they stopped. And then he would post the video that night, which seems insane to me, but he did it.
Nice.
But anyway, yeah, his videos were pretty neat. And then it sounds like his his plan is to give away the car at some point in the future as well. So maybe this will be kind of like a pay it forward 7 Series, just keep giving it away after a few months of ownership.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So that was fun.
Another open spot in the driveway, Ethan.
I know. Well, that's where the 944 Turbo is coming. I'm getting that in a couple weeks. So.
Oh, yes. The infamous 944 Turbo.
Yep. Very excited about that.
Slow car fast.
Well, that one's fast car fast.
Fast car fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Deceivingly fast car fast.
I'm going to completely abandon my principles and purchase probably the fastest vehicle that I've ever owned. This will be my next car. Right after talking about how much I like slow cars. Oh, well. I have no principles.
It's okay. No, that'll be fun. That'll definitely be a fun car to have in your fleet for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what's going on with my car stuff. I'm thinking maybe, if you're ready, we could dive into the topic of the day.
I think I'm ready.
Okay. Resurrecting a dead car brand.
Rise, Colossus, rise.
Exactly. From the dead.
Mm-hmm. We should have saved this for Halloween time.
Oh, I know. That would have been good. Yeah. Well, we'll come up with something else.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of ones to choose from. I was thinking, you can go first with yours, but I just want to mention a couple of the ones that I totally forgot about. You remember Eagle? I completely forgot about Eagle.
Mm-hmm.
I totally forgot about that. They had a whole bunch of interesting imports, essentially. And then, of course, Geo and Saturn, and then Datsun, at least in the US. I know they brought it back for some other markets. And then, the old school ones like Oldsmobile, Pontiac, all that. But yeah. Packard, yeah. I kind of didn't go back that far in what I was looking to talk about, because it just, it's before my time. I don't really have much interest,
Right. Yeah, that's the crazy thing with it, though, is in researching this, I was just looking at some of the defunct car brands, and when you go back to the beginning of the car, late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a ton of people jumping on the bandwagon making cars, and there were hundreds of manufacturers, all over the place, but it not all of them took off. The majority of them didn't take off, and a lot of the ones that did, ended up going under or getting absorbed into another company. That's just kind of the way it worked to where it is currently. So it was very interesting, though, looking at some of the things, because there's a lot of things I hadn't heard of, and just being a car fan and a history buff too, it was interesting reading about some of them, especially some of the ones from the countries where you wouldn't really kind of expect car to be produced, but there's a good number of countries that you wouldn't think would make cars that have made an attempt at making a car for themselves before. So it's pretty cool. So without getting too deep into it, it's a pretty awesome history seeing all this, and it's fun. It's just knowledge to keep in your head that, you'll share at a party one day and then your friends will just walk away from you. That's kind of the way I go about doing it.
That's that annoying car guy again.
Yeah, there he is.
Yeah. All he talks about are cars.
So
can I make a quick guess of what you're going to... Okay. I think you want to resurrect Mitsubishi. Oh, that was not nice. They're still around. I forgot.
They're still around. That was good, though. I like
Dad joke.
Put-om-cha. No, actually, I thought about this for a while on what I would choose, and it came down to 2. Okay. And I chose the one that's kind of a little more suited towards that Paul Car-esque-ness, but I've got ideas, because the other, besides just resurrecting it, what kind of would you do to ensure the company stays in business going forward?
Sure.
Right? That's kind of the other portion of it that I thought of. And in thinking about all this, it made me really think I'd either be the best or the worst CEO of an automotive company.
Yeah.
And most likely worst.
I was thinking the same thing, because of my desires would not match up with the desires of the market and the desires of actually making a business work. Right. So we don't necessarily need to make it all work. We're not writing a business plan here. So
no.
Yeah, we can have a little bit of freedom in terms of...
I tried. who knows?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Maybe some of the executives out there listening to our show,
Yes.
across the
I think they
country.
all listen.
I think they all do. Yeah, they all
do.
subscribe. And
Mm-hmm.
so who knows? Maybe I'll get a phone call tomorrow, and that'll be great.
Sure. Yeah.
So, Ethan, I'm going to resurrect Saturn.
Saturn. That's a good one. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So what's the rationale for resurrecting Saturn? I mean, they did have some good ideas.
They did.
They did kind of get off to a good start.
They did. They got off to a great start. So when the recession hit in 2008, and then the eventual closing down of the three of the brands in the GM family tree, it was
it even three? It might have been four. Was Hummer out at that point too?
It was Pontiac, Saturn, and Hummer, and also Saab. Saab was like that fourth one that was like, we don't know what's going on here. And then it was like wish-washy for a few years, like independently owned.
And did Oldsmobile leave just a little bit after that? Was that
Oldsmobile, 2004 was its last year.
Oh yeah, 2004. Okay.
Yeah, so that didn't last was the last year for Oldsmobile, and they shuttered that one down. So,
okay.
And I really toyed between Pontiac and Saturn, and which is kind of really off the wall for me because I really don't, most of my car knowledge and everything is more in the, Japanese or even European type stuff. So, but I just thought about it like, what would it be nice to see? And if I could do it, and I was kind of reminded of the Simpsons episode, and forgive me, listeners, if you don't know Simpsons references, but the one where Homer finds out he's got a long lost brother who's actually a CEO of a car company.
Yep.
It just kind of reminded me of that. But the thing with Saturn is it's I guess its tagline is really what got me. It's kind of a different kind of car company, a different kind of car. And I thought about those early days of Saturn and how innovative they were. Well, innovative to a degree. I mean, they were part of the GM family, and those basically from 1990, its first model year, up to about 99, everything was kind of the same thing, where it was like, or the kind of that it was owned by the engineers and by the factory workers. Everybody had kind of a fair share and fair say into what direction the company wanted to go. It was a pretty cool thing.
Did it have a fair amount of autonomy outside of General Motors as well? I can't remember if that was the case or not. Yeah,
they did. And the whole purpose of the company being created was so General Motors could do a better job at competing with the Japanese imports.
Sure.
The whole idea of the company came about in the early 1980s and didn't start producing cars until, late 89 into 90.
Yeah.
But it was just very forward thinking. And that's kind of something that I think needs to kind of happen in present day. And that's the reason why I'd want to bring Saturn back. When they killed off the other branches of GM, I was kind of like, I remember being pretty upset because it's, as a car person, even if you're not like attached to a certain company, it's like, oh, that company's gone. Like, I had memories in an Oldsmobile or a Pontiac or a Saturn or a Hummer, whatever, it's gone.
It's gone, and also you just knew that they had a heyday that was insane. Like, the Cutlass Supreme, or the Cutlass was a best-selling car for years. Mm-hmm. It's like, and then it just kind of all went away.
And then the company's gone, and that's the same kind of thing that, like, it happened with all the different companies, and then when they decided which ones to go, I was just like, why didn't they get rid of GMC? It's like,
exactly.
It's like the same thing. It's like you could have made GMC its own like trim level line for Chevrolets.
I still don't know why GMC is around. It doesn't make any sense to me.
The Chevy Silverado GMC Heritage Limited or whatever the hell you want to call it. It just got leather in it, But I wasn't working at the company at that time, so I couldn't make that decision.
Not up to you.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that innovative thinking from the early days of Saturn and how nice it would be to have that in a current day auto manufacturer that isn't like Tesla, because I mean, I know we've talked about Tesla a few times on the show, but it's a very forward-thinking company where they're trying to think about the future. So I like that idea of thinking about the future for a degree, but at the same time, since I'm running the show here, I want to put my own spin on this whole thing.
Sure. Okay.
So, we don't want to make it into a business plan, but at the same time, this is what I would like to see from the company, because we had, until a few years ago, there was a lot of good hot hatches rolling around, like a Focus ST, a Mazda Speed 3, and the, to another degree, not really a hatchback, but like the Lancer Evolution, and these fun cars for $30,000 to $40,000, and they still exist. Civic Type R, which you've driven and loved, but other than that, there's the GTI. And there's also the WRX STI, and getting pretty thin after that.
Yeah, Veloster and
I forgot about the Veloster N that just came out. Yeah, I mean, so there's really not an American car company that's making something of that degree now.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking something along the lines of a hot hatchback to start up and muster everybody's enthusiasm for it. Oh, we're bringing something back, because the cars that they made, I don't want to say fast, but the fast Saturns that were made in the past were actually really good and kind of underrepresented and understated. I guess like
underappreciated too. The Ion Red line was pretty decent.
The thing came with a supercharged engine, just like the Cooper S, and supercharged engines are just a ton of fun. There's blowers screaming on it and everything. It's great. And then they had the Sky and the Pontiac Solstice, which I love that car. I mean, I would definitely own one of them. Maybe I'd have to drive it first, but I mean, on paper, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. I mean, the 260 horsepower, rear wheel drive, manual transmission, turbocharged, and top goes down, and it actually looks good as a convertible, which is a bonus points right there. So I'm thinking something to start out would be like something hot hatchy that maybe could take racing to the World Touring Car Championship or the Blancpain, whatever Speed World Challenge.
Whatever they call it now. We should probably figure that
something
out.
Like that. That would be kind of to bring the enthusiast, something like a driver's car to start, almost as a halo, right? And the cool thing with something like that, you should think about, like, I'm going to use the Ford Focus as an example. Like the Focus ST and eventually RS came out, and that's like the top trim level. But if you wanted, you could also get the basic spec one that's just your basic transportation. So something along the lines of that would have to be like a first car to come back. And GM doesn't have anything like super crazy right now. They do the I guess it would be the German branch of GM still offers the Opel Astra. So, and that car, as far as I could tell from my research, is still running in the World Touring Car Championships and the British Touring Car Championships. So that platform's out there. And since they've kind of gone away, Saturn's gone away in 2009, 2010, there's been a lot of leaps and bounds in technology with cars, making them, with the turbochargers and everything. So I think that some sort of a fun little, maybe 300 horsepower hot hatch would be fun, that you can get up to that level, but also is like, a normal everyday car with a good automatic transmission that's great for little Timmy's first car, whatever the case may be. Bring the people in that way. And then after that, my other idea, I have an ideal 2-car launch. So I am basing it off of kind of Daihatsu when they had 2 cars here. So the other thing would be like some sort of a small-ish CUV. And before we scoff, I'm thinking like... Well,
people buy them. So.
They do. And I'm thinking about a car that I see about 97, 98, maybe 99 of these a day on roads in Southern California, because they're super popular, and that's the Subaru Crosstrek.
Yeah, I see a ton of them.
Ton
That's
of them.
true. Yep.
Something
So a
along
lot
the
of
lines
those.
of those that, and you can still get that. As far as I know, you can still get the Subaru Crosstrek with a 6-speed manual transmission in it. And
Okay. Yeah, I
you
didn't
can
know
get
that.
5. I'm not 100%, so don't
Okay.
quote me. But you can get it with a manual transmission. So, obviously these cars are going to have the, manual options. That's the way it's got to be to
Sure.
resurrect.
Even if less than 1% of the customers buy it, you still have that option.
Because, I think that
You need to.
you need to.
Yep. There's no good reason for it, but yeah, you need to.
You need to. So I think that
This is one of the reasons why our company, our new Saturn, would go out of business pretty quickly, because nobody buys manuals anymore. But we'll try to get people more excited about them.
Well,
So
that's the
that'll
thing.
be part of the marketing plan.
We'll take them racing. So that's going to be part of the marketing right there. I mean, even though the race cars will probably be fitted with a direct shift, paddle shifters, but I was thinking something along the lines of like a club racer spec, kind of like some of the Saturns were in the past. Like, in the 1990s, the early and the mid 90s, from seeing some of the press from them in the past, they were pretty well represented at like with the SCCA, either with the solo, the pro solo, so the autocross, and also for some of the showroom stock touring cars that were out there. A lot of people were running Saturn SL.
Oh yeah,
SL coupes, I think, whatever they were, the coupe ones. They were running those guys, and it was a pretty basic formula that the cars had. It was very similar to a Dodge Neon ACRs that used to exist, where it was kind of the bare bones. You can get the 2-door had the twin cam motor, the 4-door had the single cam motor, so it was either 130 or 150 horsepower. It was a good car for doing that, and I believe there was even factory support during the heyday for this grassroots racers that were out there. And I think something like that would be an awesome addition to it. It's like, hey, you want to go do SCCA Pro Solo? Well, here's the new Saturn hot hatch that's maybe just set up perfectly for, or set up to like dominate in G stock or whatever a super competitive autocross class would be, something like G stock or something like that, or an SCCA, showroom stock B or whatever it is. I'm not sure, but one of those things, that would be. So it's open for that. So yeah, we're still failing because we're just catering really to racers and boy racers.
Sure,
but
that's fine. We'll make it work.
Down the line, we're going to bring out a truck.
Okay. Why
not? F-150 is the top selling truck, so we're going to make a better truck. That's what we're going to do. And
all right. So how is it going to be better? Do you know, or just know that you're going to make a truck?
It's going to be better because it's going to do all the truck things that a truck should do, but do it better. I thought about this. So, you're going to have the towing capacity that's going to be higher than, the competition. The bed might be an extra foot on it. So, it's something, it sounds cheesy, but gimmicky, but like, it's kind of like the whole Spinal Tap thing. These ones go to 11. Well,
I mean, a lot of the truck market is so competitive right now that a lot of the new trucks have all these kind of gimmicky features with these beds that kind of, these tailgates that kind of fold in all sorts of different ways, and built-in steps and like other compartments inside the bed. So I definitely think you'd probably need something like that in order to make it work.
Come with a built-in tent, kind of like the Aztec.
Yeah. A Saturn F-150 kind of competitor. That would be interesting.
It'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of my idea. And of course, since we're working with GM's bankroll, I'd want to bring in some designers that really could make a nice kind of a classy look to the car. Not like on the level of Cadillac or something like that, but I want something that just, when people would see it, that it would just invoke desire. And there would be just one rule with the designing of all the new cars, and that's that there's no floating C-pillar, D-pillar, whatever, that doesn't exist.
Okay.
I don't like that. So
no.
And that's pretty much.
Well, the interesting thing is that if you look at some of the early, like the first, the S-Series coupe, like you were talking about, when that came out, that was pretty futuristic looking. It kind of was sort of reminiscent of the GM EV1, kind of very similar to that. And even the logo, even the Saturn logo was, I remember when that came out, that was very different. It was, like as totally went along with their brand, and I totally bought into the idea. And even their commercials for the thing were kind of really positioning this company as something different. So yeah, it's interesting how they let that erode. Like GM let it erode with a lot of their brands. Most of their brands.
So there we go. So let's bring back Saturn. It would be fun. I would drive one. I mean, it'd be kind of sad if I ran the company and I still drove my Honda Fit.
Exactly.
What's wrong with that guy? Well,
I don't know.
He's really weird.
Well, Saturn, that was a good choice. I was considering that. I don't really have too much experience with Saturns. I never owned one. I think I'll have to find one at some point. But yeah. Nice. Good call.
Well,
so
what are you?
I initially was thinking Pontiac. That was my first thought but and I sort of think back to Pontiac, and I sort of realized that that's probably not what I should choose, because their golden years were really kind of before my time. The golden years were like 60s, 70s, and then the 80s, I like cars from the 80s and 90s, and that was kind of a rough time for Pontiac in some ways. I mean, you could call out things like the Fiero; those were kind of cool, but even those had bad PR, with engine fires and all that. And then just think back to the Pontiac Phoenix and the, and then it's just kind of I think that's kind of when it started to go wrong, and I have nostalgia for some of those cars. I have nostalgia for the Grand Ams from the 80s and 90s, even though I kind of thought they were garbage back in the day. But I looking back, I'm just kind of excited to see one just because it's interesting that those cars are still kicking around.
Right.
And looking back, I can see why they had the body cladding. At the time, I thought it was cheesy and cheap, but looking back, it's oh yeah, that's kind of neat to remember that time, And then I was sort of thinking about how GM was kind of finding the groove, maybe right before they killed it. You remember the Pontiac G8 GXP, which had the 6.2 liter LS3, which is I totally wanted one of those cars. But they made so few of them that I think they're still holding their value pretty well.
They are.
And I totally wanted one of those when it came out, and I was oh, Pontiac's finally starting to get it, and they killed it off. But then when I look back at the the lineup of 2008, 2009 Pontiacs, I'm nah, their cars kind of still sucked. It was all badge engineered garbage. Remember the Torrent, which was an Equinox?
Yes.
Remember the G3, which was just an Aveo?
Yes.
And then they had the G5, which just was a Cavalier.
Yep.
And then they had the Grand Prix, which was so ugly. That was the ugliest Grand Prix. That the last generation.
The last one, yeah. Oh. I remember the one from the 90s, the 98, 99 Grand Prix. I was
cool.
That was a great looking car.
Yep. And then they had the Bonneville, which I can never understand why that car existed. It just didn't make any sense.
Right.
And then they had the G8 sport truck concept right around that time, which kind of got people excited. It was an El Camino, but with a huge V8 Pontiac. And I was trying to remember back to looking at their website back then, and they had a very consistent message. Their message was sporty, and that's what it had always been. But it sort of seemed like they were actually trying to make that true. But it pretty much was not true. You look at the whole lineup, you're this is mostly garbage with a few gems. Oh, and then the other thing is that was right when they came out with the Solstice Coupe, which was beautiful. That car was beautiful.
Very few were made.
Yeah, exactly. They killed it right as that was getting underway.
I think the production on that was something 600 and something cars.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. I remember reading about that somewhere, because I saw that. I used to just drool over the Solstice. Yep. I thought it was such a great looking car. And, oh, there's a coupe version of it now. And it was,
Whoop. Yeah, the coupe was where it was at. I mean, it was really, really a good looking vehicle. I think I've seen one once in my entire life.
Yeah.
So and the funny thing is when you think back about Pontiac, and I ended up not choosing, but I thought about Pontiac a little bit, and they were just badge engineered right up through the end, all through even through the 70s and 80s and 90s, just so many badge engineered cars where it's do you remember how right around that time GM used to put those little dumb little GM emblems, those little square GM emblems on everything? Yep. And it was
front fenders.
It's not Yeah, and I always thought it was so stupid because it's not like everybody already doesn't already know that these are just badge engineered GM cars. It's like we already know it's another car with a disguise on it, you know?
Right.
So I always thought that was pretty silly, but and in the end, I was just thinking about how sad Pontiac, like the whole story of Pontiac, is just kind of sad, you know. They had this great start with these like this, you know, the GTO, and they had some pretty decent cars, but they just did such a, and they, you know, even recently back in like the maybe early 2000s, they were selling like 500,000 cars a year. It was, you know, it wasn't like, it was nothing to scoff at, but it was just like, I don't know. I always think about badge engineered cars. It's like just putting a disguise on the car so dumb people buy them, you know?
Yeah, I think it was kind of like set up for, you know, it depends on the kind of customer. If you're a badass that likes speed, then you go with a Pontiac. But if you're the sensible elderly gentleman, then you would go with the Oldsmobile. You know, It is kind of like, that's kind of how I saw it, at least marketed. Yeah, Pontiac, before they went away, they did have some cool stuff. The G8s, the GTOs that came out, that was awesome. That was a really something that the industry needed at the time, but nobody bought into it, and nobody bought them.
Yeah. Well, and it's somebody that's interested in marketing, you know, I've spent a lot of years in marketing, and I always just think about the potential of that brand. Like that brand meant so much to so many people, and GM just squandered it year after year. And they squandered the potential of it. And I remember back in like, I think it was like 2008. I think I remember sending a few emails. Like I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere, but they had like, you know, their website had like, hey, we want feedback from our customers. So I remember just writing them some emails and just telling them how much they could do with this brand, you know, if they just actually really stayed true to the idea of it, of like, you know, actual like performance vehicles rather than just badge engineered stuff, you know?
Right.
But anyway, I spent a long time talking about Pontiac when that wasn't the one that I chose. It just makes me sad to think about it, you know? I think it probably makes a lot of people sad because it was, you know, especially older people where like they really kind of changed things back in the 60s. So.
They did. They were basically the first muscle car. They kicked it off.
Yeah. Yeah. So ultimately, the brand that I really want to resurrect, I want to resurrect Scion. So I own a Scion, as you know, and one of the reasons why I bought it, because this was one of the only car. This was actually the first car I ever bought new. Remember when I saw that hit the U.S. market? I was just enthralled with the idea that I could buy basically a almost unchanged car, a JDM car. I was really excited about that idea that this was sort of like a K car-ish kind of thing. Obviously, it wasn't that small, but it had a lot of the similar qualities. You know, small engine, lots of space on the inside, like really, really good use of space, tons of headroom, pretty decent. I mean, insane legroom in the backseat of this car. Still to this day, I can't think of a car that uses space as well as the original Scion XB. So that was something that I was just super, super excited that I could buy this. And I remember just that. I remember having a list of cars, and I just crossed them all off after I saw that. I'm like, I'm going to buy a Scion XB, and I ended up buying one. And it's also important to like think back to like when this car was introduced in 2003. I had been around since maybe 2000, I guess.
Yeah,
in 99 or 2000,
99, I think,
something like
when
that.
The BB,
yeah, when the Toyota BB came out in Japan. But you just have to think back to like cars were sort of not really very exciting in the early 2000s. You know, it was a lot of crap. I mean, it was just really not a very good time for cars, I don't think. And this was one of those things where it just sort of excited me and excited a lot of people because it was different. You know, it's very, very different. And, you know, I didn't personally like the marketing for the cars. I thought it was too immature, but still I kind of overlooked that because I think the idea of the car was great. And it was really cool that Toyota, you know, made the effort and thought that it would be a good idea to bring it here. And, you know, that was just one of those cars that, you know, it really got Scion off the ground. I think Toyota didn't really know why people were buying it. I think they kept doubling down on this boy racer image and this whole idea that it's going to be a car for young people. And it ended up being a car, just a really useful vehicle that lots of people could find a use for. And I think that they kind of missed the mark and didn't really understand why people were buying it. So when they, so they sold a ton of those. And actually, I just realized that they sold more TCs than they sold XBs over the course of the, Scion. But, that was another car but it was a good car, and it really hit the target market really well. But I think, pretty much a lot of people know what kind of killed Scion is that the second generation XB, they Americanized it. They made it heavier, got crappier gas mileage. It was a little bit quicker. I still like that one. I still like the second generation, but I like the first one a lot better. And I think that, people quickly realized that, well, I don't know. Maybe it also could just be that there were other cars that were coming out, like the Kia Soul at the same time, it was around that time that maybe were slightly better. I'm not sure. But, and then the XD, remember that thing?
Yes.
That was ugly. And then pretty much, the second gen XB just didn't sell well. And then they didn't do anything until the FRS, which offered a slight sales bump. But then, that's just one of those things where you're going to get the enthusiasts initially, but it's not like a volume car,
Right. It's an enthusiast car.
Yeah, it's an enthusiast car. So you get a little bump right when it comes out, and that's not going to save the company. So no. And then they ended up having a few more ideas, but they killed it off. I think they just wanted to nip it in the bud. That's another one of those ones where they just let it languish. They just, for whatever reason, it could have been the economy or whatever. For whatever reason, Toyota just did not invest anything into it until the very end, and then they just decided to make everything Toyota. So that long-winded Scion history and that I kind of was remembering, I was thinking I would want to start off Scion again, and from a branding standpoint, I understand why Toyota killed it, because it's I think too many brands are a bad thing just for any company. Even if especially if it's badge engineered stuff, GM should kill off most of their brands because it's just all the same car with a different skin. Exactly. It doesn't make any sense. But, I think I would try to bring Scion back with the same idea of how they started, with bringing over a JDM design. So bringing something that is only available currently in Japan or maybe another market, maybe a car that's only available in Afghanistan or some other place where I think people will get excited about the idea of a different approach, a different look at why cars are designed, I'm just so sick of all the American centric big CUVs that are even CUVs that just the use of space is really bad. The Toyota CHR it's an abomination.
Yes.
Just the way that it looks, it's trying so hard, and the use of space is awful. You can't fit anything in it. It's tiny, even though it's kind of big. So I think that even though it's a bad business idea, I want Scion to try to bring some of these JDM cars to the US. So, and maybe kind of treat it kind of like GM originally treated Geo. I know that sounds weird, but so just find stuff that is not available here and even bring it over in smaller numbers. And I totally understand that that's half the stuff's not going to meet our crash tests, but we can just ignore that for now.
Sure.
So I just was looking at a lot of the cars. So if you go to the Toyota Global website, which is kind of fun. I like going to those websites every once in a while just to kind of refresh my memory as to what vehicles are like in other countries. And that, I went through most of the Toyota worldwide markets, and Japan by far has the most unique Toyotas out of any region in the world. And it makes sense, they're located there, so they can probably be a little bit more experimental. But I also think that there are just really interesting ideas that they're doing there that they're not even trying anywhere else. So, this is the first one that I came up with that I found is the Toyota Sienta. So this is kind of maybe slightly bigger than a Prius V, maybe. I don't know exactly on the size, but it sort of looks like a Mazda 5 a little bit. It's kind of ugly. But it's this mini minivan. And it's got a sliding door on the back. It's a hybrid, so it gets really great gas mileage. And it just, it just hits a lot of those marks for me. Like I like the idea of a vehicle that has very, very good use of space and also gets good gas mileage and is kind of small. So that's exactly the reason why I love the original Scion XB. And it seems like there's a lot of vehicles like that currently for sale in Japan. Even just from Toyota, like a lot of manufacturers have this stuff, but even just from Toyota, there's a lot of cool stuff that kind of checks those boxes. And I just wish there was more of that here, because it would be nice to be able to buy a smallish vehicle that has a lot of space, that you can move a lot of stuff and that gets decent gas mileage. Right now, our choices are just CUVs,
Right.
There's nothing. I mean, maybe the Kia Soul is maybe the only thing out there that is kind of in that ballpark, because it's sort of it's one of the leftover box cars,
Yeah, and they just redesigned it too, and I think I'm sure they've changed a lot of stuff on the inside. I'm not really too familiar with it, but I'm thinking it's probably kind of gone away from its original roots a little bit too.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of just feels a little bit more like a CUV now. But I mean, I think it looks nice. I actually kind of like the new redesign of the Kia Soul. So a couple more that I found. There's another one. This is kind of more just a regular minivan, the Estima.
Oh,
but it's just,
yes.
It's a hybrid. Like you can get a hybrid minivan. Like the only hybrid minivan we have available here is the Pacifica. Chrysler Pacifica. But I don't know. And I'm sure Toyota looks at all this stuff and they're probably very certain that they're not going to sell many. And obviously minivan sales are kind of in the toilet right now. But so that's probably not my best example of how I would resurrect Scion. But so I would probably go smaller than that. Let's see, what was the other one that I saw? So this other one that I really liked, which would never meet our crash test here, which is the Pixis Mega. Ooh. So the Pixis Mega, so Pixis Mega. This looks like a shrunken down Scion XB, like the first gen. Kind of looks like a shrunken down first gen Scion XB. And this thing is amazing. It's one of those things where it's a tiny, tiny vehicle, but it has an insanely good use of space because it's a box. I think there needs to be more cars that are box shaped and fewer cars that are swoopy and just are trying to look sporty but have awful use of space. So that one's kind of a neat one. There's also the Toyota Tank, which is also a very similar idea to the Scion XB, which is it's got some sliding doors in the back. Apparently, there's quite a few vehicles that are like this in Japan right now. And then what's the other one that's pretty neat? This one is called. What is this one called? Oh, I can't remember. The Rumi. It's pretty much exactly what you think it is. It's like this little small hatchback, but the driver's side door, I think it's a driver's side door, maybe it's a passenger side door, it's only a 3-door. It's like a hatchback, but the door slides. So it's a sliding door. The front door is a sliding door.
Interesting.
So I think it is the passenger side. And the passenger seat like slides way far back and far up. So that way it's a really interesting use of space. Now you can like put a ton of stuff in this car because the front seat moves so much and you have this huge sliding door. It's awesome. So yeah, actually that's the Spade. I'm sorry, that's the Spade. The Toyota Spade.
The thing I love is I just love all these names that they have. Yeah. They're so good over there.
Yes. Yeah, and let me see. There's a couple other ones that I think, like, if you're listening, you should just look up when you have a chance. This one, it probably would not be a good Scion, but it's just kind of interesting to think about. So the Toyota Alphard.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure you've seen that one. It's kind of just a luxury Toyota minivan. It's not good looking. The front of it is an abomination. It's just like this huge chrome grille. But you look inside this thing, it's great use of space again, and it's like just a really, really good idea for a vehicle that probably won't sell here. But what is it? What is another kind of cool one that I saw? So the Rumi is another one that just looks like a Scion. Oh, and then actually in other markets, like I think in Italy and maybe now in the UK, they've got the Corolla hybrid wagon. So this is not the hatch. This is longer. don't know if you've seen this one. So they call it the Corolla Touring, but you can get it with a hybrid motor. So just picture like the current Toyota hatchback, but longer and more useful. Another one of those cars that I would love to see here. I'm sure they've run the numbers and they figured that there would be no way they could bring it over here. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like you can just figure out some of those kind of interesting world cars that we don't get here and then find a way to create a brand that just allows you to bring them over here. That's kind of where I got the Geo analogy, where it's, maybe they're not going to be huge sellers, but at least give people a few other options rather than the same old crap.
Exactly. The same old badge engineered crap. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting about that Corolla wagon. Subaru has a model called the Lavorg it's a similar type of thing. It's basically a WRX wagon, but not, I guess. Very popular. They sell them in the UK and in Japan, obviously. Cool cars, but nope, not for us. We're too obsessed with Crosstreks. So I guess we're not going to get that car. Yeah, that's very interesting. All those, some of these Toyotas they have over there, very cool concepts, and they work great in Japan, and they could work great here in the United States. I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to go as far to predict that there might be a van revival soon, but I'm thinking the CUV bubble's going to burst, and everybody's going to be like, I don't want this anymore. Let's move on to the next trend. And maybe there might be a van resurrection. I don't know. And if that's the case, maybe Scion comes back as a minivan subsidy of Toyota, and and maybe then we'll get the Alphard.
Alphard.
I think that's kind of like touted as like the luxury minivan, which
it is.
Is really kind of cool. I think I'm totally down with it. And then the Estima is actually like the continuation of the Previa. So it was sold in Japan as the Estima, and then it still continues to this day. It doesn't have the cool 45-degree angled mid-engine motor that whistles when it drives by you. But it's still like that same idea behind it. It's smaller than a Sienna. So
yeah. Well, and I know that Toyota is never going to bring Scion back. I know that just doesn't make any sense for them to do that. But at the same time, I just would like to see some of their other market cars come here. And I'm sure all the economics around that make absolutely no sense since a lot of the manufacturing's here and all that. But when you're talking about the van revival, I would love to see that. The numbers aren't currently showing that, but I always kind of wonder too, when you think about like CUVs are all the craze right now. Everybody's buying CUVs and SUVs. And, is it the chicken or the egg? Is it because that's what companies are designing and that's what dealers are pushing and the margins are higher? But is that what people really want? I kind of feel like I want something that is more like a van because I think, like, for instance, my Prius, it's too small for me. I can't stand how small it is. But it's a part of that is just because it's just a very poor use of space on the inside of this thing. It's a car that's designed for gas mileage at the expense of everything. Right. So I would like and that's why I've sort of been considering the RAV4 hybrid. I don't want a CUV, but I can't really think of anything else that gets decent gas mileage that has more space, and that's not the Pacifica hybrid or whatever, or it's not a Tesla Model X. Like there's just not anything in that little segment. So I saw recently, I tweeted about this. A couple of years ago, Toyota came out with a TJ concept, a TJ Cruiser.
Yes.
So it's amazing. I doubt Toyota is going to bring it here, but if they did, I am definitely buying one of these things. It makes me as excited as when I first saw the first gen Scion XB. So this TJ Cruiser concept, it's not good looking, but I like the idea behind it. So it's just this kind of minivan that's a little rugged. It's got all-wheel drive, but it's also a hybrid, and it has a great use of space because it's a box. So it's just a minivan. Like I think that's a great little segment that needs to come back. It really kind of got, think back to like some cars that were in the 80s, like my Stanza wagon. That was kind of a
minivan.
Yeah. The Mazda 5. There's a few things that are like that, they just never sold well. And obviously there's a reason for that. Vans just have a stigma, but something like this TJ concept, I think, could help remove that stigma and help people realize that they don't need a swoopy CUV that
has horrible use of space.
And it doesn't have much more space than a sedan, or has less space than a sedan.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. That would actually probably be like...
I'm all fired up now talking about vans.
Well, we do have the van episode.
Yes.
Idea.
Yes, we have to
dedicated to the van. I think something like that TJ concept would be like almost a perfect first car to bring back for Scion. The idea. I like the idea of bringing some of the JDM flavor over, but something like the TJ concept where it takes the ideas of it and kind of doesn't, I don't want to say fully Americanizes it, but makes it so it just hits that mark just almost perfect, just kind of like just how the XB did,
Yep.
That would be awesome. That would be a good way to bring it back.
Yeah, totally. And the XB certainly was not a perfect car. There's a lot of things that I can complain about it, but still to this day, like I've owned that car for how many years now? Since 2005, and I still can't get rid of it just because to this day there's still things that are very useful and that I still like about it. So, yeah. So if anybody from Toyota is listening, if you do not bring the TJ Cruiser to the US, I'm going to be very upset with you. So
I'm going to be upset.
Remember that,
because I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah,
I think it's a very cool idea. And anybody from GM's listening, just bring back Saturn. Make it a sports car company. It'd be awesome.
Sure, with a truck.
I threw that in there at the end. I really didn't think too much about it, but just throw a truck in there. It's fine. Okay. The people will buy into it then. All
right. Before we end this episode, I have one question.
Yes.
And I'm not sure what I'm going to go with this, but I think we need to answer the question, what do you think is going to be, or maybe should be, the next dead car brand? Which is the next brand that should be killed off or should just kind of like die a slow, painful death? I don't know. There's a few. There's a few out there that I could go for, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, I think of maybe like 5 or 6 that I think could be killed immediately.
Okay. Well, what do you think? I've already expressed my disdain for the branch of GM called GMC. That needs to go away.
I agree with that.
Sorry for any Canyon and Sierra and Yukon owners.
I mean, they're fine vehicles. There's so much overlap. What does it even mean? I've never understood what GMC means. I don't think GM has ever.
They don't know. Means, I think.
I don't think they know. They just have this brand that they're like, well, it still sells well. I guess we should keep it around.
So GMC, I think that's just my opinion. Something that needs to go. What do I think is going to be the next one to go?
Yeah.
I don't want to say the M word because I'm put a lot of faith in my little Mirage.
Well, the funny thing is with Mitsubishi, I feel like if I've read I feel like their sales are kind of on a slight upswing. I might be wrong, but I have a feeling like there might be, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel there. I don't know.
So,
yeah,
I would hope so. It would be sad, and kind of like we said at the beginning of the show, it's sad as a car enthusiast to see a company just disappear and go away,
especially a car company that you there was cars that you like the Evo is great.
Yeah, that would be the end of the history for that right there. The Wikipedia page ends.
Well, exactly. I mean, at least in the US for some of these.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, this is actually a pretty tough question.
So I'll just at least tell you what brand I think should go away. And Bradley Brownell is not going to be happy with me because he just bought one. I think Buick should go away. I feel like the only reason why GM keeps Buick around, at least in the US, I will say Buick should stick around in China, maybe other markets, but mainly probably just China. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't really, the Buick brand it's one of those brands, it's kind of like GMC where it doesn't really mean much. It's sort of like, is it a luxury brand, or we can't quite make these vehicles as nice as Cadillac, sort of like budget luxury? It's really kind of hard to tell how you should pitch it. And I feel like they've only kept Buick around in the US because it sells these vehicles sell so well in China. So I feel like that's one that if that went away in the US, I don't know. I'm kind of wondering if anybody would really care.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I mean, to be honest, I can't really tell you about any Buicks besides that Regal Tourer X that Brad has.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
Not even though we've been back and forth on this badge engineering thing, but, we could easily absorb that in and turn it into a Cadillac.
It should just be a Chevy.
My new Saturn wagon.
Exactly.
New L300.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. That's what it could be. So, yeah, no. Other than that, I don't know what the hell else Buick has.
I'm not sure either. I mean, I did see one recently that I kind of thought would be kind of neat to drive. It's a few years old. They actually made a turbocharged. What was it? Was it a Regal?
Yeah,
I think it was a Regal, but it had a 6-speed manual transmission. And there's one on Facebook Marketplace right now, and I know it's going to be there forever because nobody even knows what it is. But that seems like kind of a fun little. They have these little sparks that kind of are neat for enthusiasts, But
all those sparks, all they mostly are with GM is they're just, this is really an Opel or a Vauxhall or a Holden or whatever. So they're just picking from the European or Australian market, bringing something over here, and that's like a spark. But
yeah, we got to find a way to keep this brand alive, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember that Regal. Yeah, too.
Yeah.
Called the GX.
It might have been the GS. I feel like it had 300 horsepower or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I remember the front bumper looking like it has teeth on it.
Yeah, it's not a great looking car.
Interesting. Okay.
So I guess the only ones I was thinking of that I'm concerned about not concerned. I don't have any personal stake or real care, but I feel like Fiat is not doing very well right now in terms of sales. I think sales of most of their, if you look at, I think we talked about this before, cars that are on the lot for a very long time, Fiats are always at the top of that list.
Yeah.
So
I think that the nostalgia and or that initial, whatever you want to say, factor that the car had is gone. You said with the FRS, the enthusiast came and got the car and then that was it. And then it's kind of the same thing with the Fiat. Yeah. Everybody's like, oh, it's so tiny and cute. And then they bought them and either kept them or got rid of them because they didn't like them because they're kind of crap. And that was that. And then they bring out other models like the 500L.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. Yeah.
And so, okay. So,
I think that one, it could be one of those brands that they're like, all right, we gave it another shot in the US. We'll go away for another 30 years or whatever. And then I don't know what do I think should be the next car brand? Tesla. Ooh. I don't know. I'm not sure. That's one of those ones that I'm kind of wondering that they won't go away, but I have a feeling at some point they're going
to get
I just read about
Mercedes-Benz or something along the line.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I read about the financials of that company, and it seems troubling, but I don't know. You definitely, there's a lot of pros about this. They're obviously changing the industry, and they're really turning a lot of it on its head and really pushing the electric car forward. But I don't know. I don't think they're going to be able to compete when when Porsche comes out with the awfully named Taycan, or however the hell you pronounce that.
That's a really cool car.
Very cool. Except for they're calling one of them the Taycan Turbo, even though it doesn't have a turbo in it. It's kind of maddening.
Car.
I know, but I just don't know. Once electric vehicles become mainstream, I mean, they had a head start for sure. That's kind of what they got going for them, is that head start. I just feel like once these major manufacturers really finally realize what they
catch up
should have been doing years ago.
Oh,
I kind of feel like they're going to leave Tesla in the dust.
That does kind of make sense when you think about it in that perspective. I was going to make a kind of a crack at it and be like, Tesla's kind of like the DeLorean Motor Company that actually succeeded.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not in the end. It's just everybody's going to, like you said, catch up to them. Huh.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, they have this cachet right now still. I mean, I think as they try to meet these lower price points, they're going to find more and more people that are a little bit more, they're trying to crank out cars so quickly. I've seen a lot of talk about, problems with these vehicles. And that's maybe one of the reasons why I kind of stopped being that interested in buying one. Even when I test drove the Model X, there was I think I mentioned there was this little piece of trim on the tester that was just completely off. And I just remember sitting in the back, just pushing it back on and clipping it back in. And like, okay, that's just what you have to think about when you're buying a Tesla. It's apparently, I don't know. Anyway, so I think that they have a lot of competition coming their way. So that might be problematic. Who knows?
Yeah, as soon as they catch up, the big ones, especially, I'm thinking Mercedes-Benz is probably going to be, I think Mercedes and Toyota and probably Volkswagen.
Yeah,
are going to do some major damage to that company once their mainstream electrics hit.
Sure.
And that could be it. That could be lights out. And, you're probably right on the money on what's going to happen. So
we'll see.
We'll see.
Well, anyway, so we've resurrected Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
We decided to kick Pontiac to the curb because they deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
And Scion, we want to resurrect Scion, even though that will never happen. It was a fun exercise to kind of think through. I think there's a lot of ideas that this industry could embrace that we have that are amazing, that will probably lose these companies millions of dollars. Millions.
Yes. This car will be offered with a stick shift.
Yes, exactly.
It's yellow. That's it.
Well, I think that's probably the end of this podcast. I think where can everybody find you on the social medias?
The interwebs I can be found at Paul's Finest Hour on Instagram and on Twitter.
Nice.
Yes.
Yep. And you can find me, my new Telluride video, youtube.com/HelloRoad. And pretty soon I'll have a video about that 944 Turbo. And then on Instagram and Twitter at Mr. Ethan Tufts. And I think that's it.
That's it.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Take it easy, everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye.